Beatles in My Life, written and narrated by Paul Griggs. An introduction. In 1957, I discovered a guy called Lonnie Donegan, who along with his Skiffle group were having hit after hit, mainly with blues and folk-based songs by the likes of Huddie Ledbetter, who was known as Leadbelly, and Woody Guthrie. He adapted these songs into his own inimitable style, called Skiffle. Lonnie was very inspirational to me, and I persuaded my father, who was a woodworker by trade, to build me my first guitar, which I taught myself to play. Along with my 8-year-old brother on washboard, and a school friend on tea-chest bass, I formed my own Skiffle group, called the Satellites. Around the same time, 200 miles away, a certain John Lennon had persuaded his Aunt Mimi to buy him a cheap, South African-made Gallotone guitar, guaranteed not to split, and with some mates he formed his own Skiffle group called the Quarrymen. The line-up changed until it included Paul McCartney, who eventually persuaded John to let his younger friend George Harrison join. A few name changes and personnel changes later, the line-up was John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, and the name of the group was now the Beatles. Brian Epstein became their manager, and without him they probably would not have made it, because none of the London-based record companies were interested in a group from Liverpool called the Beatles. He eventually, and against all odds, secured the Beatles a record deal with Parlophone Records, and a reluctant, at first, producer, George Martin. George Martin wanted them to record How Do You Do It for their first single, but they were adamant that they wanted to record their own songs, and so Love Me Do was chosen. George Martin wasn't wrong about How Do You Do It, as it eventually went to number 1 for Jerry and the Pacemakers. I don't remember Love Me Do first time around, although it did go to number 17 in the charts in December 1962. I remember their second release, Please Please Me, which went to number 1 in February 1963. I thought it was okay, but it didn't knock me out. But their third release certainly did. (1963) Thursday the 16th of May. The first time that the Beatles made an impact in my life was around April 1963, with the release of their third single, From Me to You. This I started to perform with the band I was in at the time. They were called Bobby Hale and the Hailstones. Now there's a name to conjure with. The first mention of them in my diaries is that they were on a TV programme called Pops with Lenny. Lenny the Lion was a puppet. This was on Thursday the 16th of May 1963. They were on TV again 2 days later on Thank Your Lucky Stars. Friday, 16th of August. I was by now completely hooked on the Beatles, and had bought everything that had been released, which at that time was 3 singles and 1 album. I was fascinated by their image and their instruments. I had never seen a Hofner violin bass or a Rickenbacker guitar before. George played a Gretsch country gentleman, and although I'd seen Duane Eddy and Eddie Cochran with Gretsch guitars, I had never seen a country gent. I really wanted to see the Beatles perform live, and I had heard that they would be playing at the California Ballroom in Dunstable. This was a huge venue with 2 stages, and although almost every top act from the time, including the Rolling Stones, performed there, despite the rumours, the Beatles never did. I had read that the Beatles would be at Luton Odeon on Friday the 6th of September, so I had sent a postal order and a stamped addressed envelope to the box office and requested 3 tickets. The tickets landed on my doormat this morning. Friday, 6th of September. She Loves You had been released 2 weeks ago and was already top of the charts, and today I was going to see the Beatles play live for the first time. But first I had to endure a day's work at the Westminster Bank in Hatfield. I almost had a nervous breakdown, wondering if I would get out in time to see the show. We always finished work when the day's business was done, and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?